Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Tuesday. It's July 20th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. I thought I would start by showing you the daily chart again. You can see quickly how, we had a really big, quick sell-off there, and that one day was probably more than half this sell-off. And of course, we bounced right near that purple outer band, and that's usually where anytime we've gotten back to that recently, that's where we've turned back up. So we didn't quite reach it, but the fact that it's turning down, if we turn back up, it'll probably turn up and it probably will have been touching that purple line. So we could go higher again here. The really overbought situation has been relaxed. I mean, we're right basically it closed right about the midline. This line, purple one right in the middle is the midline. And so the really dark purple one, I guess this is more of a lavender color or whatever, but this dark purple one is the midline. And so we closed right at that today. We could turn back down from here, so don't think this sell-off is technically over yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if we go higher from here. Remember the original move we had up, and we looked for the measured move, and you can see we went a little bit higher than that before this thing really settled. We were just really overbought here. We needed to relieve some of that pressure, and we did, and we backed off quite a bit. We were almost to 4,400, and we backed off to 40. That's 200 points in just a couple of days there. Most of it all in, 100 points of it all in one day. So no surprise that we rallied. And this could just be a down up bar, and we could work back down some more. So don't lose sight of that yet. Again, though, it wouldn't surprise me if we go higher from here. We did close above that midline in there today. And I really thought we'd come back and at least test this line before we went higher. So that's not out of the question. That's generally what will kind of happen. So we could continue down again. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it go either way. I'll be honest with you. Looking at this daily chart, there's no way to really say, hey, where are we headed next? You can see last time we had that big capitulation sell-off day, and then boom, we rallied out of there like a rocket. It seems to be doing the same thing today, although we backed off some at the end of the day. So wouldn't surprise me either if we got some more down room to go here. So, but this looks very similar to what happened the last time, right in here. So don't be shocked if we rocket up out of here again. This market just doesn't seem to, just when you think it's time to throw in the towel, it rockets up for another 100 or 200 points. I mean, we just came off of 40, almost 4,400. Yeah, that's a pretty incredible move for considering we were back here in May, we were at 4,050. So that's 350 points in a couple of months there. That's a lot of movement for the ES. So um, we'll see. But anyway, I just thought I'd put that up. Let's go back to the intraday chart, the 2,000 tick chart. Okay, even with all that movement today, there's not a lot of trades in here. So I've got a couple of shorts in there. I'm not crazy about shorting when you're in it's just like yesterday when we were in that downtrend. You got to be real careful buying. And same thing here. You got to be real careful shorting this one. Although we did fold over, and you could tell we were kind of losing momentum here and probably coming back to the trend line. So you'll notice a couple of shorts in here, possibilities. Most of this is all going to be blue, but there's not, especially this morning, even though we were rallying out, there's not a lot of entries here. There's not a lot of good setups, so it won't take long to go through this. That's the reason I thought I would show you the daily chart as well. But we were in this range early on. Of course, you look for a measured move on that, which was here. But secondary, you would look at the last leg up, and very rarely would we go into the other day. But we had to go into the other day really to see this leg here. And you can see that leg, and then we had this big correction. And so the second leg would come, and that was right in here. And you can see we really found quite a bit of resistance right in there and backed off before we went higher. And that's going to be people that know to look for these measured legs, probably taking their profits there. But what we did was we had the yellow channel. It was just too steep, and then we kind of folded over into this green channel, which is more realistic and much more of a healthy channel. About a 45-degree, meaning from corner to corner of your chart, is a healthy trend. Anything steeper than that usually won't last. Anything flatter than that's usually not a very good trend. So a good healthy trend that will continue will be at about a 45-degree angle. And you can usually get an idea. I mean, you don't want to get your protractor out or ruler out and try to figure all that out. Just know that if it goes from corner to corner, that's about a 45-degree angle, and that's generally a rather healthy trend. So keep that in mind. Again, it doesn't have to be specific that you got to measure it. I've had people come, write me back and say, well, this was a 41.4% or whatever, and it's not that. It's not that critical. So don't think you have to get out your protractor and figure out exactly what you're looking for. But let's talk about the trades. Again, early on we were in this sideways channel. It looked like it was going to be a range day, which would have been. Oh, let me back out here one more time. I want to show you one other thing. Yesterday, that huge move that it started in the previous day, and you can see the black line is where yesterday started, and the black line's where yesterday ended. But we opened down here, and so on the daily chart without the 24-hour data in here, there's a gap between where that yellow line is and where the low of the day was the previous day. Actually, I've got that line in the wrong place. It should be right there. So there was a gap between here and here. And so that's what I think prices were trying to fill today. And you can see now that gap. And prices also like to come back and test those last lows. And notice that we pushed down there and never really came back and tested that. We just kept going lower. So that gap was probably likely a target. We ended up going a little higher than that, but notice we've traded back down and bounced right off that same level again. So I wanted to show you that. Once we start going higher here and you start passing up these measured moves, then you got to look for what the likely target is. And that would have been my first target. And we just pushed through that, pulled back and tested it. And we kept coming back to it. And we've actually come back to it again here late in the day. There's still 45 minutes left to go in this day, so we could bounce from here, but it wouldn't surprise me to close around here or lower than here. But we filled that gap now, and so you had to assume when we kept going higher, that's probably what we were doing. I looked for this target first, then the measured leg as I showed you, which was right in here, and then you start looking for targets if you can't find another leg. So that's one way to kind of find where prices are likely headed. So let me back out. We'll go through these trades. 7 o'clock came right as we're kind of topping back, right in here as we're coming back up and topping out. And then you actually get two legs up here. There's a little two-leg correction, and there's two legs up. And there's actually two legs in that last leg up. Then we come down, we push through the EMA, we pull back. You get a lower high here. Technically, I'd like to see a lower high a little closer to this high, with room back to the EMA, but this one you do have to go short below the EMA, and that just looks like one leg down, so you'll probably get a measured leg at a minimum. So you may take that trade, especially with all this sideways stuff. It's a little aggressive, but if you want to take it, it turns out to be if you take that trade, you get a runner here, and you probably ride this thing all the way back down. And of course, you would look to probably exit where the overnight lows were, and you notice we went a little further than that and then bounced. Unfortunately, you don't get another really good setup to enter this until right here, and my signal bar is no good. Notice the low, first entry, and then a second entry. So I can't enter this trade, and no, you can't wait till this bar and then enter, unless this had equal highs, then you could. But this is a lower bar. This is your signal bar. So if your signal bar doesn't qualify, you can't move to the next bar unless it's got an equal high, and this one doesn't. So even though that's a very bearish bar, you can't use it. You can't enter way down here. Yeah, it works. Looks really good and real simple here, but next time you try it, guess what'll happen? The prices will be rocketing the other way, and you'll be thinking, why did I do that? So if you had a good signal bar, that's I mean, you're still looking for a new low. The lows of the range are down here. That's a great second entry short, but it doesn't qualify on my chart. I just put that arrow there to remind myself to talk about it. And then, of course, you get another first entry, another second entry. But again, my signal bar is no good. That's way too bullish, and it would have worked, but it's just not a very good setup. And you don't really get a good setup to go long. You got a first entry, second entry. I don't think even if you had a good signal bar, I'd want to take a second entry long there necessarily. I'd wait for a reversal or something. And you actually get a reversal here. And normally you want that to be back here, and that looks a little congestive. I marked this one green, but it's aggressive. But you just hadn't had any trades. That's probably the best of what we've had out of since 7 o'clock. Here it is almost 9. I've been sitting here 2 hours, and that's the best of the best. So you might want to risk it. It's aggressive. A really good trader probably just sit here and keep waiting. I mean, you didn't really get a trade till almost 9:30 this morning. That's the first blue or red marker I got. So this was really difficult to trade, but that is a second entry long. It's a failed second entry short, and it's a pretty good signal bar. It's a little congestive. I think there's enough room to get out there. So let's see if there's 6 ticks in there. Yep, there's exactly 6 ticks. So even if it would, I mean, it doesn't matter. It didn't turn down, but if it had have just went to those highs and turned down, you would have had just enough to scalp out. So I like that trade from what we've seen so far this morning. It's not a great setup by any means, but there's reasons to take that trade. Then of course we get a little breakout here, we pull back, and there's a lower high here. And it makes a double top, but it ticks maybe 1 or 2 ticks lower and instantly turns up. Guaranteed that's going to trap people. Again, it's risky to go long on a breakout. So again, I marked it green, but I guarantee if it breaks higher there, you probably get at least a scalp. And maybe it takes on off because maybe this is not a range day. I mean, there's still going to be some resistance here, but there's, this was at 2 and 3 in the morning, and this is already 9 o'clock in the morning. So there's a lot of things going on, and this is in the overnight as well, where you're not going to have a lot of volume to push it on. So there's a good chance, since we didn't find any resistance there, we pushed right on through and then pulled back and then came back again. And technically you might have moved this a little lower here, where those, like right across here where you got the most touches in the last few closes, and you can see that bounces right off of it. And that's a good indication that we're probably going to at least push up to a new. You probably get a scalp at the very minimum is what I'm getting at there. Again, it's aggressive, so it's not for everybody. So I'm sure I'll get an email and say, why would you trade the breakout? We don't trade breakouts. Well, if you learn to kind of figure out what the context is, and there's times where you'll know, and if you don't have the skill to recognize that, then you don't want to take that trade. So just hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, we run on up, and finally we sell off. There is a lower high here, but I wouldn't take that trade. It's just too congestive right there. And what we do is we just drop down into another little congestion, and you get that little failed breakout right there with a nice bullish bar with plenty of room back to those highs. And we could, a lot of times these are little failed breakouts, even on a little congestion, especially in an uptrend, if it's to the low side, that's probably going to trap a lot of people trying to get short. This is where, believe it or not, you'd be shocked how many traders will get short right here. Worst place in the world you could get short. If anything, you want to buy this little breakout. The odds are so much more on your side, exponentially on your side, to buy that than sell it. And you'd be shocked how many people will sell that right there. And it traps them. And so then that gives it momentum to take off again. And you actually get a higher low here. I didn't mark this one blue because it's right into that high. And but I still like it. Odds are we're still going higher here. The trend is still up. We had a little bit of a correction here. There's like a little there's actually 2 legs here, and the trend resumes. This was the better place to enter, but you might enter here. The problem with this one is you're just going long right into the highs. But the trend has been strong, so go with it. We run up, you get a first entry. There's actually a second entry long right there, but look how that's just going sideways. 3 inside bars in a row. That's just a sucker. That's just a sucker trap right there to try to enter that on the second entry. Don't do it. And the fact that we couldn't get back up to the, notice how we came down, we bounced, we had a little break here, and we got a new high in place. So wait on a really good setup here. And you might have looked at this as a first entry, and this is a second entry, and this one would have worked. But even here, we don't have a, that's the first close outside that channel. So I'm going to wait. And you get a first entry short, and then you get a second entry short that fails. I like going long here. You could have gone long 1 tick above this bar or 1 tick above this one, however you wanted to do it. And I don't know which way it broke first. I'm pretty sure this broke lower and then turned up, and you could do it on an engulfing bar. But your stop would have to go down here until this bar closed, and then you move your stop 1 tick below that bar. So no matter which way it broke, that's how you'd play it. And that's a failed second entry short. So I definitely like going long. Again, you probably get a runner here, depending on how, if you waited for this bar and entered 1 tick up here, you may not have got a runner, but you really should have entered way down here. The better entry. And then it just takes off again. And again, I don't see any good entries. We're way too far away from the EMA. And then we're just working sideways. Thinking short here is a possibility. If we were a little further away from the EMA, maybe you go short right there. But that's just too congestive. You drop down here, and it looks a lot like we were setting up like this, but it just doesn't give you the good setup like this one did. Notice that's your lows down here, so this would technically have to be your signal bar, and that's an inside bar and another inside bar, and it's not very bullish. Even though it takes off out of there, it's just not a very good setup, and you don't get a chance to enter it. Again, it just rockets off. And finally you come back, you get a first entry, and then when it breaks here, you get a second entry. I kind of like this one because you close outside and get a new low here. It's not a perfect signal bar, and it is a little congestive, but we would expect a retest of the high, and this is played out fully. The better thought is a higher low and maybe a failed second entry. And you get a higher low here. There is a failed second entry here, but it doesn't set up right. We don't get back to the EMA. It's just congestive. And if you draw your little channel here, you can see that it just doesn't set up properly. We've already got a close outside and a new high before that triggers. And all it is a little two-legged correction, then it takes off. So, but you can't really count that as a second entry. So again, not a very good entry. We run up here, and then people finally realize, hey, we're running out of steam. And once they all start exiting, boom, look at it go. And then you get a close outside right here. Move to a new low, actually 2 legs to a new low, and then you reverse. Here's the one short I marked green because that's a really strong move down. And this is the first close. We're not back to the trend line. And this actually breaks higher and turns down. And look how bearish that is. There's a little bit of sideways stuff here, but you're probably going to run down, at least get a scalp out of this, and you're probably going to run down to the trend line. It takes 2 legs to get there. So you wouldn't have got much of a runner here. But the other thing is you would think prices are probably coming back to test this level here that I showed you that filled that gap. Because we only came back and temporarily tested it once before. So you would expect prices to maybe try to test it again and maybe come back to the trend line, which they did. And then it bounces out of here again. And there is a possibility of a long here if you had a good signal bar, but my signal bar is horrible. And I don't get a higher low, I don't get a reversal, nothing. So there's just no way to trade that. But we start working sideways, you get a little failed breakout. It makes a new low, so a lot of times you want to wait on a higher low on that, which comes here. I didn't mark that one, but I was trying to decide if I really thought that would make, I mean, it's real close to being blue, but I'm going to leave it green. And it's a higher low. and you're closing back inside the channel. The problem is we're turning down off that midline, and we tried to get through there multiple times, so we may be headed back to here. So you're better to wait on a failure, which comes here. And so when it breaks above that bar right there, it's a second entry long, and it's a failed second entry short. Normally, when you're in congestion, you don't care too much about that. But the fact that we made this new low here, and we're trying to go lower, we're probably going to at least go back into the range and test these highs again, which is what happens. And you actually get a trap here. This is technically a double bottom, so you could count that as a first entry, second entry. So if it breaks higher right above these two matching highs, that's a failed second entry short. And it's probably going to run the stops up here and run up real quick, even if it's going to come back. And that's what happens. And then that leads us into, you run up here, you make this high, double top, you come down, you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry. And that one is very, very tempting to go short. I put this on there so I'd remember to talk about it. You can see how congestive it is, and you would have got stopped out on that trade. And it looks like a really good reversal other than that congestion. So I wanted to be sure to talk about that one, so I marked it here. And I don't think I would go short right here, even though it turns out to be a nice move. Now it's your first break, but you just about want a second entry short. Although you may not get one on a tight channel like that, and that is a spiking channel. But you can see how that spikes down and goes down. Then you get your first entry, second entry, and that's so tempting because it's such a bearish bar. But if you take that one, it's like a 4-tick failure, and it stops you out and then goes exactly where you expect it to. So that congestion sometimes can be a booger, so be careful with it. And two, another thing about this is that's a good example of why you got to be careful going short in an uptrend, because that looks like a great trade, but you would have got stopped out on it. So it punishes you for counter trend trading even when the odds are on your side. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, we'll be back. I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.